Look at this blood real quick. You see my finger? I had an accident. I cut my finger, but that's fine because I'm going to tell you what I cut my finger on in a minute. But I want you to look at part of this real quick. This is December the 3rd, a historical day pertaining to the powers that are being shifted around.
The party's over for Donald Trump because he's been enjoying a Republican majority.
I want to back this up just a little bit.
Oversight responsibility seriously.
Yeah.
Have a little study here on history.
Tonight's other major
Hang on one second. Sorry about the...
This morning.
That ain't it neither. Hang on. Right. They're bringing in a new power pertaining to
ranking members on high-profile.
All right, listen to this, please.
These three men will take chairmanships and with it the power to investigate the president. Now, as Democrats prepare to take their places and open investigations, let's look at where the oversight power comes from. Article 1 of the Constitution lays out the duties and powers of Congress, and while it covers everything from minting money to punishing piracy on the high seas, there's no mention of congressional investigations. But the founders did get a chance to address this issue, because in 1791, during the very first Congress, Arthur St. Clair, Major General Arthur St. Clair, he was a general in the Revolution. He led troops into what is now Ohio, losing 700 men in a battle with Native Americans. Well, the House formed a committee to investigate the incident. The first time an official under the president's direct supervision was investigated. That's according to House archives. Now, at first, President George Washington was uneasy about handing over documents and files and witnesses to the House committee, unsure if the House even had the authority to investigate. But Washington consulted his cabinet, drawing agreement from bitter political foes Thomas Jefferson and then Secretary of State Alexander Hamilton, who was the Secretary of the Treasury, that the investigation was legitimate. St. Clair was ultimately cleared, but the precedent for House investigation had been set. Now, through the 20th century, the investigative powers of Congress have been asserted and brought down a corrupt Interior Secretary during the 1920s Teapot Dome scandal and investigated presidential misconduct in the Watergate hearings, leading to President Nixon's resignation. Now, Maryland Congressman Elijah Cummings prepares to head the newly renamed Oversight and Reform Committee. Adam Schiff is getting ready to control the Intelligence Committee, and New York's Jerry Nadler is set to chair the Judiciary Committee. All three will have the power to bring investigations looking into the president, into his appointees, and more. Joining me now, Toronto Star Washington Bureau Chief Daniel Dale and Los Angeles Times White House reporter Eli Stokols. Welcome to both of you. Daniel, I noticed something you wrote, or I don't know if you wrote it or you tweeted it, but I saw something you wrote that said, the party's over for Donald Trump because he's been enjoying a Republican majority that hasn't actually taken its oversight responsibility seriously.
A public spectacle.
Yeah, the Republican majority showed no interest in seriously scrutinizing the Trump administration. And now it's a whole different ballgame. You know, it's not just the three individuals whose faces you just put on the screen, although they will be crucial. It's everybody, including Maxine Waters, a congresswoman that Trump has disparaged repeatedly, who has promised to investigate his relationship with Deutsche Bank. The Veterans Affairs Committee will be able to look into just what's going on with the VA and the three Mar-a-Lago members who appear to be controlling some of the agency's decision-making. So it's his own finances, it's the activities of his cabinet members who have escaped scrutiny. And I think what will be different now is a lot of the scandals that many liberal Democratic voters have been frustrated have just disappeared because Trump buries them with ever more scandals, will now last longer, I think, because there is someone outside the media in the form of the Democratic congressional majorities who will now have the power to keep them going with subpoenas, with investigations.
Eli, what are you hearing from the White House about how far Nancy Pelosi will let these powerful chairmen go in their investigation? She's got to walk this tight line, this tightrope. She said she's going to wait for the Mueller investigation, but Jerry Nadler told me the other day, first order of business is get Matt Whitaker, the acting attorney general, to testify before his committee. Adam Schiff feels the House Intel Committee didn't do its job under Republicans. So how does Nancy Pelosi manage this?
Well, that's the tightrope that Nancy Pelosi has to walk. I mean, as you point out, President Trump and his administration are giving House Democrats a lot to work with when it comes to their oversight authority that they will have now. And the issue for Pelosi is she understands, obviously, that her new majority comes largely from voters who wanted Democrats to serve as some sort of check on this White House, and yet she's also very aware of not overplaying that hand, of being sober and straightforward and following the facts and not appearing to be politically motivated, because what we've seen all along from this White House when it comes to answering criminal investigations, the Mueller probe, charges from Democrats, he dismisses everything as being political. It's always a political response to these investigations. And it won't be any different with the new investigations that the House Democrats bring. And he will be able to say, look, they're the Democrats, this is all politics. And he might have an easier case to make just because they all have D's after their names than what he's been trying to do in terms of broad brushing everything that Mueller and the Southern District of New York come back with. And so that's where Trump will be coming from in terms of trying to prejudice the country against whatever results come out of these things, to sort of inoculate himself preemptively. And I think Nancy Pelosi will have to be very careful, because they were elected to unearth a lot of these answers and to provide oversight. And yet, heading into a presidential election, they do not want to appear overzealous or overly motivated by politics.
So that's a tricky one, Dick.
I want to stop right there towards being overzealous or overmotivated towards having too much gun-ho in this presidential election that is now starting to line up in regard to, I believe it would be 20 and 20, or 20 and 21 would be the next president of the United States. If you look to the far right, it says right here, government shutdown. Now, since the powers are beginning to turn, I feel like that I can speak more freely pertaining to our chief and commander, Donald Trump. This year, the year of the Jubilee, the year of 2018, has possibly been one of the most distracted, denormalized years or events that was considered abstract, unusual, and just all out and out wrong pertaining to how that our ancestors intended for the United States government to run. I personally have never in my entire life seen such outlandish moves that the general public or the media wanted to focus a lot of attention upon to our professional athletes, towards them not putting their hands over their hearts and them not pledging to our allegiance, and instead of standing proud to the American flag, they bowed a knee. I have never seen so much irregularities pertaining to John McCain passing away and the flag going down the pole, up the pole, and then back down the pole. I have never seen so much bickering, brawling, political brawling, disrespecting each other and disrespecting our political normalcy as I have in the Jubilee year. Because of it, I wanted to display my personal feelings of how I felt in walking out of that dilemma in 2018. Not just on a local scale pertaining to the events that's went on around here that I know various supposedly good, sound, decent people has been aware of. They have either heard of it or seen it either on YouTube or Facebook platforms, or they themselves has even talked about it. I purposely put out the American flag after Christmas to walk out of the Jubilee into the year 2019 upside down, disrespecting the characteristics of what went on in and during 2018. There's no doubt in the year of the Jubilee, we lost some grand, mighty, tall, horrendous figures, pillars of society, such as our First Lady, such as one of our prior presidents, Mr. Bush. It has been a topsy-turvy year, almost like riding a roller coaster ride, up and down and up and down. We're going to do it this way, we're going to do it that way. And to see the American flag go up the pole one day, down the flag the next day, up the flag one day, and then down the flag the next day, has, I guess, been one of the most saddest, heartbreaking, atrocities that I have ever seen to come up onto this land. Even when flying this big flag out here, in which I'm fixing to go show you that I have turned it around because of the powers changing. No one stopped. No one throwed me out a rock with a piece of paper on it saying, "Hey, Dennis, don't you think you need to turn your flag around? You got your flag upside down." No one wanted to bring it to my attention. And the reason why is simply because no one in this area either recognized that it was being flowed incorrectly, or they just didn't care. And I tend to wonder if that's where we are right now as a nation, is that people just don't care. As long as it's not affecting them and their family and their way of life. Oh, they say that they feel sorry for the next one down the road who falls or stumbles or who comes into their calamity. But yet no, they don't make no point towards even assisting in some of the most horrendous tragedies that befallen that person. When my brother David died, I at least thought out of the decency of the dead that the stuff going on with the Sheffield family, with the Lester family, and the Ridgway family would have toned down at least a little bit. It didn't. It got worse. And I tend to wonder that during that 10 days of my mourning my brother's death, that God only knows I would have sacrificed 1,000 lives for David to have still been here with us. But during those 10 days, I thank God the Father, seeing how displaced that I was, to the point of allowing for these heathens to place a false charge upon my life, and not allowing for me to know when the court date was towards them coming out here and rearresting me because I had missed my arraignment trial, because the attorney that I had hired by the name of Attorney Bruce Brown up in Union City, Tennessee, did not let David or I know when the arraignment trial was going to be. And because I didn't have being placed on a, seems to me like it was $100,000 bond, or maybe even more. Being placed on that high of a bond, I couldn't make bond. I even contacted another old attorney by the name of Dempsey that lives in Huntington. He wouldn't pick up not one finger, even though I have fed him, give or take, probably around $4,000 since I have paid for legal affairs, from bankruptcy to other types of events. Even though I have paid him that kind of money, he still did not make an attempt to show up in court the day that I was scheduled to show up in court, after that they had rearrested me in my not showing up for my arraignment. In those 10 days, I got laughs, I got falsely accused, I got a nut job that was still riding around here like a buzzard flying around its prey, that was steadily infuriating and intimidating my life in some sort of way by now not just screaming out, "You're a pedophile," not just screaming out, "You was having sex with your dog," not just screaming out other types of cruel and insulting remarks, but now I'm a murderer. These remarks didn't just come from one individual, but come from the whole family. Keep in mind, whenever I first come out here in 2014, my brother and I going to build a facility that was going to be in honor of our grandmother towards our military, men and women, in uniform. There was all kinds of resistance towards me coming back here, to the point that I couldn't tell you the amount of times that we got either vandalized or threatened or challenged, either on this side of the road or on that side of the road, by different individuals. Not just one, but by many. So at that point I knew, I repeat, at that point I knew that I was not dealing with just one particular person or one particular family. Now I'm dealing with a multitude of people, which now turns it into a clan, which now turns it into a conspiracy towards trying to devour and either run me away like a little puppy dog with its tail tucked between its legs, or drive me off into a state of either suicide, of either taking my own life, or drive me off into a state of David or myself stepping over the line towards actually breaking the law. And the whole time, David and I was crying out to the law, "Please help us, please help us." We even put a sign out here the first year, "SOS, SOS." And they all sniggered and laughed. Whenever you're dealing with such intelligence as this, whenever you're having to fight off the demons on one side with one of your arms or your hands, but you're still trying to act graceful and ethical and moral and decent and graceful on the other side of the hand, sometimes the division in the middle becomes disproportionalized to the point that you really don't know what to do other than just to stand for what you believe in, remain standing of that in which what God had called you into doing. I have never in my life been attacked in such of a unjust, unethical, immoral, vicious savagery way as I have since I have come back to 291 Thompson Road. And you would think by now, well, for surely he's got the message. For surely he knows that we don't like him and that we want him gone. The more that they try to force me into doing something that is, first of all, illegal. Secondly, it goes against my own rights towards me being and thinking and praying to my own personal God. But it goes against my humanitarian rights that I'm supposed to have in regard of the doomsday devil's duel, the sword symbolizing peace, pertaining to the two witnesses, believing in the Jewish biblical Bible prophecy. It goes against all laws and degrees and ethics that my forefathers and my father fought in World War II, so that I would have the privilege of being able to stand gracefully and proudly for what I believe in. There's no doubt, if I was living in another land, Russia, China, India, Africa, Australia, Europe, South America, Mexico, Cuba, or other parts of the world, Canada, and if I would have flown their national flag the way that I flew this flag, leaving the year of the Jubilee, coming into the year 2019, I would have had either had been arrested or I would have been shot. Because of this being one of the greatest nations in the world is the only reason why this year not only did I fly this flag upside down wrongfully, but I also, in the spring of this year, because of the activities going on in our politics, I'm trying to make a point to my viewers. And it's been very disheartening in this correspondence course in putting out all this material and basically getting back absolutely zero confirmation. But I even flew that flag upside down long about Easter. And I'm not talking about the Christian flag, I'm talking about the American flag. It has been one of the most irregular, unusual years of the year of the Jubilee that I personally have ever had to deal with on a respectful level, and others can say the same, I know they can, in how displacent that the American government has become towards basically just becoming an open public circus. I'll repeat. An open public circus. The only thing that these people out here have done, they have caused me, first of all, to dig in even deeper. And the only thing that I can say that they have accomplished is that they have caused such of a disruption in my life that I was basically hindered in continuing that in which what God the Father had called me back to Northwest Tennessee in 2014 to begin with. That's the only thing. A big distraction. If Donald Ridgway and the Sheffield family and the Lester family and some of the other families around here, if they can beat their chest in thinking that they're great apes to some degree, like they have accomplished something. The only thing that they have accomplished is by bringing more misery and sorrow into not only the American way of life, but into this world that we call planet Earth. And the only thing that they have done is bring that much more shame and disgrace into their own personal lives because of this type of behavior. I wrote to my viewers New Year's Day, and I told them that because of the lack of intelligence and the lack of correspondence, that I would not be burning up their social platforms this year with as many videos that I had put out in the year 2018. Now, because of their ignorance, and I mean that respectfully, because I know that not everybody is ignorant pertaining to knowing and having common sense about all this. But I want you to look around this tree right here. I had sprayed this because I know that the robbers that come into my dwelling place a few years ago had stolen my weed eater, and because I was going to be traveling so much in and out of Middle and West Tennessee this year, I decided to spray it down with some Roundup. I've done the same thing to that tree. I've done the same thing to other things out here. The year before last, I had 3 automobiles sitting here. It may have been the year before that. It may have been, I think it was 2014. I set 3 automobiles out here, and you can still see the markings where them vehicles had set in, because the grass of the Bermuda, the wild Bermuda, is differently over here than it is over here. But the point that I'm wanting to make is that you see all this green stuff, okay? That's not moss. Some of it's moss. Here and here is moss. But all this is grass. Okay? And it's greenery that is coming up through the wild Bermuda. This is January the 3rd. What are we doing seeing signs of greenery in the northern part of Northwest Tennessee, which is give or take around 20-25 miles the way the eagle flies from the mighty Mississippi, and less than 75 to 100 miles of being in the state of Southern Illinois? What are we doing seeing greenery the 3rd of January this time of year? Already sprouting out of the wild Bermuda. I'm going to tell you why. It's because the ground up underneath it has become warm. Warm enough that now, all of a sudden, we have sprouts of not only grass, but that right there's clover. That's clover. This is wild clover. Okay? That's clover. What are we doing having greenery come up this time of year? It's been down in the 30s for the past 4 or 5 nights. We've even had one snow long about Thanksgiving. But then all of a sudden, things warmed up. But it didn't warm up enough to cause that. That is being caused by the heat of the core that's underneath the plate. And because of the nutrients pertaining to the crude oil that we continue on a day-to-day level of draining out of the ground. It does not have the mass or the elasticity that it ought to have of what they're replacing back into the plate that prevents from the heat escaping from the outer layers of the planet. The reason why that our oceans is warming, the reason why that our reefs is dying, the reason why that our atmosphere keeps changing, it's not so much of what we're doing as far as the carbon dioxide up there, but what we're doing is draining the protection that protects us from the heat expanding out into the outer layers of the platelet. And because of it, the ground is getting warmer and warmer and warmer every year, to the point that in January, right now, what I should be walking on is frozen ground that has been frozen at least 3 to 4 inches thick, and this